I'm an electronics engineer by profession, so the technology sector is of prime interest to me, and I think we'll all agree at least the last 6 to 8 months has been phenomenal for the technology sector. And I also see that you're somewhat befriending Mr. Gates and inviting him into your house, etc. Is there a possibility down the road a piece of you doing some type of purchase of Microsoft or acquiring that, or is there something you two could work out together?
I bought 100 shares first day I met Bill, and that was the end of it. I just want to be sure I got his reports from that point on. This was personal, not in Berkshire. There's no chance we'll be in businesses we don't understand, and I won't understand it.
No, you're quite clear on that. I just thought maybe there'd be an exception because apparently.
Well, if you made an exception, he would be a very good guy to make an exception with. But I don't think I'll make an exception.
You know, there's somebody here who's really disappointed you didn't mention Microsoft, and that's Bill Gates, Director Bill Gates, and of course founder of Microsoft. Come on in, Bill's going to.
Okay, ask him the same question.
well, Bill, I mean, can't you get him to pump your stock? And I can't say pump and dump because he never bought Microsoft.
No, I don't believe in promoting stocks. Even great companies like Berkshire or Microsoft. Warren promotes the products, and I'd love to promote Microsoft products.
When I first met Bill in 1991, I bought 100 shares of Microsoft, and I haven't sold it. I mean, I am one of their most loyal shareholders. Never sold a share.
100 measly shares.
Well, okay. It's more than 100 now. They split.
Can't you get Warren, as you look ahead, to get a little more tech savvy? I mean, how's he doing? Did you give him a Surface tablet?
Warren's online playing bridge a lot, and he's pushed his companies to think about the changes taking place. Geico's been a real leader in taking the internet and actually connecting in a more efficient way with their customers and actually finding an attractive customer base through the digital interaction. So even technology has reached Berkshire Hathaway.
And Bill's been helpful in that incident. Bill, I won't name the company, but Bill, with one of our companies, took them a long way in terms of using the internet. He realized it was hopeless to tell me how to do it and then have me relay it. So he just went direct, and it was very helpful.
Your perspective of what purpose or what appropriate role antitrust legislation should play in American business.
I am no antitrust scholar. I think well, I met Bill 8 years ago, and he's a terrific teacher, and so he spent about 6 or 7 hours explaining his business to me. And he actually, I mean, here I am, the world's biggest dummy on technology, but he explained it to me pretty darn well. And when he got through with it, I bought 100 shares of stock just to keep track of him. And I think that shows two things. One is that I got an IQ of about 50. And the second is, I didn't think he had any monopoly.
You have gotten into the tech world with buying Apple. You have Mr. Gates there. I'm just wondering why you've never bought Microsoft.
Well, in the earlier years, it's very clear. The answer is stupidity. But since Bill has, particularly since Bill has joined the board, but even earlier than that, because of our friendship, it just would be a mistake for Berkshire to buy Microsoft, because if something happened a week later, a month later, in terms of them having better earnings than expected or making an acquisition, anything, both Bill and I would incorrectly, but would be a target of suggestions and accusations, perhaps even, that somehow he had told me something or vice versa. I try to stay away from a few things just totally, because the inference would be drawn that I might have talked to somebody about something. So I've told the fellows, that Ted and Todd, for example, that there are just a few things that are off the list because there'd be a lot of people that wouldn't believe us if something good immediately happened after we bought it. And of course, to buy a lot of stock, you can take 6 months to buy it or something of the sort. We just don't need it. But both that and my stupidity have cost us a lot of money. It's a good question, and I think the answer makes sense. But Charlie?
Well, it's part of theology that a late conversion is better than never, and you've greatly improved yourself.
Technological revolution. Ironically, our approach to that is just the opposite of Bill's, but that his is the right one for the world. Ours is the right one for me. I look for businesses where I think I can see what they're going to look like in 10 or 15 or 20 years. We don't own any, but if you take Wrigley's chewing gum, I don't think the internet's going to affect how people chew gum. You know, and Bill probably does. I mean, but I don't think it's going to affect the fact that Coke will be the drink of preference and will gain in per capita consumption around the world. I don't think it'll change whether people shave or how they shave or the fact that they like a better shaving system as the Mach 3 is going to be very shortly, I might add. So we are looking for the very predictable, and you won't find the very predictable in what Bill does. You'll find the more exciting things, the things that are going to change society more. And so I have a little different opinion. As a member of society, I applaud what he's doing, and as an investor, I keep a wary eye on it. And that's, it's a different approach to investing. Most people think of that all as opportunity, and it has been opportunity. Every internet stock has gone crazy here in recent months, but I don't know how to look at one or the other and tell the winners.
Yeah, this is an area I agree strongly with Warren on. I think the multiples of technology stocks should be quite a bit lower than the multiples of stocks like Coke and Gillette, because we are subject to complete change in the rules. You know, I know very well that in the next 10 years, if Microsoft's still a leader, there will have been at least three crises that we will have had to really prove our excellence in. I accidentally once, when we were on a panel with the CEO of Coke, I said something like, I couldn't run my business when I get to be 60 because it's such a hard business, not like Coke. And I offended him without meaning to.
You won't offend me. I want to be in a business I can run when I'm 100 because I plan to do it. I'm going to retire about 5 years after I die. Maybe.
I would say this about the Microsoft case, that, and I've expressed this to a couple of news organizations who asked the question earlier. 20 years ago, this country really had sort of an inferiority complex about its place in the world economic order. And we talked about having a country of hamburger flippers, and we thought we were going to lose our steel industry and our auto industry. And we really didn't quite see how America fit into the world where it looked like the Japanese and the Germans to some extent and all those were eating our lunch. So, and there are many of you who are too young to remember that, but there are many of you in this room who will remember that. And we were very depressed about our economic situation in this country. And then this, whatever you want to call it, information age or whatever, came along, fueled by technology, and we've just swept the world aside. I mean, we are so far number one that it's difficult to think who's number two. So here we have, and it's changed. In some way, it's contributed to a change, I should say, in the national mood, and it's what part of our prosperity is accounted for by it, no one knows, but I think everybody in the room would agree that it's significant. And that age is going to get, and that development is going to get more and more important in the years to come. It's going to be fueling much of what happens in the world, and for this country to be the world leader, and like I say, you can't even see who's in second place, and moving faster even to increase that lead with all the benefits that brings. You know, I think
I think we've got something working very well that probably doesn't make a lot of sense to tinker with too much. So I would not want to go in with a meat axe into something that is pulling this country along, in my view, in a huge way. And I don't like to tinker with success, and it's an important success. It's really an important success. Charlie and I may not understand how to play that in terms of buying the companies that are going to do well 10 or 15 years from now, but we know some companies will do well, and we certainly know it'll have a huge benefit to society, even if it makes business less profitable but makes the society more efficient. I mean, that is a huge edge to have. I would love to have the most efficient industry in the world in this country, even though it might pull down returns on capital against the less efficient system. So I think neither one of us would be inclined to go in there and mess around with something that's working.
If you look at the big picture in patriotic terms, having lost totally in radios, stereos, television sets, etc., many other places, and having lost position in other major industries to the Japanese and others, we finally get huge leadership in a new and wonderful field, software, that's needed all over the earth. And somebody who's drawing a salary from the United States government gets the bright idea that it should dramatically weaken the one place where we're winning big.
Yeah, and incidentally, we can't buy Microsoft. I mean, because people would assume, if something happened the next day, they would assume Bill had told me or something. So Microsoft is one of the few stocks that's just totally off limits. But it looked awfully attractive to me, actually, at various times.
Bill Gates is one of the great managers of all time, and is an exceptional business talent who loves his business. And when you get that combination and a high energy level and now an heir to leave it to, I don't think you do much better than that. Charlie, you love to talk about World Book.
Well, I think World Book is clearly the class of the field. They have every word in the English language graded for reading comprehensibility, and the articles are cleverly written, so the difficulty of comprehension rises slightly as you go through it, and it's very user-friendly to young people. And since it's something you want to encourage, making it user-friendly is wonderful. I also find that with whatever intellect I have, it's more user-friendly to me. And so I think it's a hell of a product, either for the young people or the old. And for a quick reference system, I don't think there is anything better. Personally, I like the reading version, being an old-fashioned fellow. And I can hardly imagine a world where the wise people don't do a lot of reading. Now, maybe we're going to have wise people in the future who spend all their time in front of screens in the course of getting that wisdom, but I doubt it. So I think you may have bought a wonderful product, but I would have the other one too.
The product you see there was the joint development and was launched in January of this year in conjunction with IBM. IBM has been our partner in that product. I believe it's being bundled into all the IBM PCs now being sold. So they've worked very well with us. Frankly, there's a book even that deals with this. Bill Gates did a very good job of developing a product that was bundled with millions and millions and millions of PCs. It's called Encarta. It's actually Funkin' Wagnalls. He hates it when that comes out, but he changed the name to Encarta, which was smart of him. And there are a few people in this room who are witness to a demonstration 4 or 5 years ago in Bermuda where
in connection with Encarta. It showed the moon and the Earth, and the moon bumped into the Earth in this. And I don't know why it sticks in my mind. I thought I ought to mention it today. But his is doing very well. So apparently there are a number of people that don't care about the fact the moon and the Earth collide. But in the World Book, the moon and the Earth never bump into each other. He's done extremely well with Encarta, incidentally. I mean, it was a masterpiece of moving into an area and pushing hard. And I tip my hat to him. But now we're going to.
Yeah, we've copied him.
Yeah, we copied him.
If someone uses your investment philosophy of building a highly concentrated portfolio of 6 to 8 stocks and adopts your buy and holding principle so that the maths of compounding and no tax works for you. But however, with one major modification, invest in high-octane companies like Intel and Microsoft that are growing at 30% instead of typical 15% growth company in your portfolio. My question is, will this investment philosophy will translate into twice the shareholder return as you have historically provided to your shareholder?
Yeah. Well, it will certainly work out to twice the return if Intel and Microsoft do twice as well as Coke and Gillette. I mean, it's a question of being able to identify businesses that you understand and feel very certain about. And if you understand those businesses, and many people do, but Charlie and I don't, you have the opportunity to evaluate them. And if you decide they're fairly priced and they have marvelous prospects, you're going to do very well. But there's a whole group of companies, a very large group of companies, that Charlie and I just don't know how to value. And that doesn't bother us. I mean, we don't know how to figure out what cocoa beans are going to do, or the Russian ruble, there's all kinds of financial instruments that we just don't feel we have the knowledge to evaluate. And really, it might be a little too much to expect that somebody would understand every business in the world. And we find some that are much harder for us to understand. And when I say understand, my idea of understanding a business is that you've got a pretty good idea where it's going to be in 10 years. And I just can't get that conviction with a lot of businesses, whereas I can get it with a relatively few. But I only need a few. As you pointed out, you only need a few, 6 or 8 or something like that. It would be better for you, it certainly would have been better for you, if we had the insights about what we regard as the somewhat more complicated businesses you described, because there was and may still be a chance to make a whole lot more money if those growth rates that you describe are maintained. But I don't think you'll find better managers than Andy Grove at Intel and Bill Gates at Microsoft, and they certainly seem to have fantastic positions in the businesses they're in. But I don't know enough about those businesses to be as sure that those positions are fantastic as I am about being sure that Gillette and Coca-Cola's businesses are fantastic. You may understand those businesses better than you understand Coke and Gillette because of your background or just the way your mind is wired. But I don't, and therefore I have to stick with what I really think I can understand. And if there's more money to be made elsewhere, I think the people that make it are entitled to it. Charlie?
Well, if you take a business like Intel, there are limitations under the laws of physics, which eventually stop your putting more transistors on a single chip. And at 30% per annum or something like that, I don't think those limitations are still a good distance away, but they're not any infinite distance away. That means that Intel has to leverage its current leadership into new activities, just as IBM leveraged the Hollerith machine into the computer. Predicting whether somebody's going to be able to do that in advance it's too tough for us.
Bob Noyce.
We could quit claim it to you.
Yeah. Bob Noyce, one of the two primary founders of Intel, grew up in Grinnell, Iowa. I think he's the son of a minister in Grinnell, and went to Grinnell College and was chairman of the board of trustees of Grinnell when I went on the board of Grinnell back in the late 60s. And when he left Fairchild to form Intel with Gordon Moore, Grinnell bought 10% of the private placement that funded was the initial funding for Intel. And Bob was a terrific guy, very easy to talk to, just as Bill Gates is. I mean, these fellows explain the businesses to me, and they're great teachers, but I'm a lousy student. And they really do it. They're very good at explaining their businesses. Bob was a very down-to-earth Iowa boy who could he could tell you the risks and tell you the upside, and enormously likable, 100% honest every way. So we did buy 10% of the original issue. The genius that ran the investment committee managed to sell those a few years later. I won't give you his name, and and there's no prize for anybody that calculates the value of those shares now. Incidentally, one of the things Bob was very keen on originally, in fact, he was probably the keenest on it, was he had some watch that Intel was making, and it was a fabulous watch according to Bob. It just had one problem. We sent a guy out from Grinnell who was going out the West Coast to where Intel was, and Bob gave him one of these watches. And when he got back to Grinnell, he wrote up a report about this little investment we had, and he said these watches are marvelous. He said without touching anything, they managed to adapt to the time zones as they changed as we went along. In other words, they were running very, very fast, as it turned out. And they worked with that watch for about 5 or 6 years, and they fell on their face. And as you know, they had a total transformation in the mid-'80s when the product on which they relied also ran out of gas. So it's not easy. And Andy Grove has written a terrific book, incidentally, Only the Paranoid Survive, which describes strategic inflection points. I recommend that every one of you read that book because it is a terrific book. But they had an Andy Grove there who made that transformation along with some other people. But that doesn't happen every time. Companies get left behind. We don't want to be in businesses where we feel companies can be left behind. That means that, an Intel could have and almost did go off the tracks. IBM owned a big piece of Intel, as you know, and they sold it in the mid-'80s. So, here are a bunch of people that should know a lot about that business, but they couldn't see the future either. I think it's very tough to make money that way, but I think some people can make a lot of money understanding those kind of business. I mean, there are people with the insights. Walter Scott, one of our directors, has done terrifically with a business that started, just a gleam in the eye maybe 10 or 12 years ago here in Omaha, and it turned into a huge business. And Walter explained that to me on the way down to the football games, but bad student again. So Walter connected, and I'd cheer from the stands. But that doesn't bother me at all. I mean, what would bother me is if I think I understand a business and I don't. That would bother me. Charlie?
Well, having flunked when we were young and strong at understanding some complex businesses, we're not looking to master what we earlier failed at in our latter years.
My husband and I have rather different investment approaches, and in 1988 he bought me 1 share of Berkshire so that I could learn something about investing. We both started about that same time, and he has chosen to invest in, let's say, about 40 different stocks and buying and selling, and doing rather well for us, frankly. My approach is more simple, and basically I finally figured out last year that I should invest in the companies of the 2 wealthiest men in the world. So I decided we should buy monthly more Berkshire and Microsoft. So then this year, and so we've been able to do that. This year we read in your report that Berkshire is selling at a price at which Charlie and I would not consider buying it. So my husband has challenged my investment strategy. I know that you are an honest man, and while you may not recommend to my partner Charlie to buy more Berkshire at this time, do you recommend that I continue my rather automatic investment buying of Berkshire? And I think I know the answer, but I wanted my husband to hear it from the horse's mouth.
I think you're using me here.
What?
Well, I certainly, we don't recommend selling it, but we don't recommend buying it either. We are neutral on that subject, and I hope you continue to be in with the two wealthiest guys. I like the other fellow too.
Thank you.
Yeah.